Welcome to my channel people. Author link will be on description, make sure to check it out. Orochimaru, go ahead as planned, spoke Bakurio coldly after seeing that the situation with Tobirama was now under control. Are you sure? Replied Orochimaru hesitantly, knowing that their next target to revive wasn't that easy to deal with either. In fact, he was even more troublesome than Tobirama. I'm sure, replied Bakurio while Hashirama's eyes flickered slightly, but he didn't interfere, and right after, Orochimaru clasped his hands and used Edo Tensei to summon Madara. The sacrifices they were using to perform this were the bodies of the many white Zetsu that were under Kagaya's control, so they didn't have to use real people. While Orochimaru was doing this, Bakurio occupied himself with restoring Madara's body, similar to how he restored Hashirama's and Tobirama's bodies using the King of Hell. At first, Tobirama didn't know what they were doing, but after the King of Hell spat out Madara's perfectly fine body, he finally realized what was happening and the danger that it involved, so he quickly yelled at Orochimaru, "Stop! You won't be able to control him with your current mastery. No, even if you fully mastered this forbidden jutsu, you still won't be able to control a monster like Madara." Orochimaru smiled eerily at Tobirama before he replied, "We were never planning to control him. Just like how we didn't plan to control you. Brother, we should stop them before it's too late," yelled Tobirama, yet Hashirama remained unmoved and simply sat cross-legged before he said, "I will trust his judgment for now," before he closed his eyes, leaving Tobirama angrily pacing back and forth and contemplating whether to attack Orochimaru or not, but in the end, he simply stood behind his brother and readied himself to fight. Meanwhile, Bakurio calmly observed Hashirama and he couldn't help but smile internally. He says he trusts me, yet he's restoring his nature chakra reserves as fast as possible, tch. Then, he turned his attention to the new coffin that appeared in front of Orochimaru and the man clad in armor that slowly stepped out of it with his Sharingan in full display. Well, I didn't expect to be summoned by someone else. It seems like something happened to my plans," muttered Madara as he left the coffin before he scanned his surroundings, and his eyes widened when he caught sight of Hashirama and his face was instantly covered with a battle-crazed smile. "Hashirama, I can't believe you were also revived. I can actually enjoy myself right after I got revived. This is quite a treat." But then, Hashirama opened his eyes and Madara instantly froze after seeing that they appeared normal, unlike those summoned by Edo Tensei. "You are actually fully revived. How?" Madara scanned his surroundings more clearly and eventually, he laid eyes on his corpse and the two people standing beside it. They had the same appearance, yet one of them had the Sharingan while the other had the Rinnegan. They were of course Bakurio and his clone, and Madara immediately had a familiar feeling after staring at those eyes. They belonged to him. What's going on? What did Black Zetsu and Obito do? Who's this guy? Countless thoughts flashed through Madara's mind, and Bakurio didn't waste too much time and directly addressed him. "I'm sure you have many questions, but I first need you to go inside this body. It's not as perfect as the one you died with, but it's still quite good." Madara narrowed his eyes when he heard this, but he didn't move and simply said, "Who are you?" Bakurio replied calmly and said, "Bakurio Uchiha." Hearing this, Madara suddenly smiled and his eyes turned into his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. Before he said, "A descendant of the Uchiha, huh? I wonder how our cursed clan is doing." Right after saying this, a blue-armored Susanoo appeared above Madara holding a sword in its hand, which he swung directly at Bakurio. "Tch, serves you right for summoning this monster," muttered Tobirama while Hashirama prepared to interfere at any moment. However, he didn't have to, as Bakurio's eyes also transformed into his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan and a pitch-black Susanoo appeared above him and clashed its side with Madara's blade. "Oh, not bad. It seems like you can dance for a bit," spoke Madara with glee in his eyes as he clashed multiple times with Bakurio before he stopped. "Hashirama didn't make any moves from the start. Does that body has some sort of seal to control me or something?" Countless thoughts flashed through Madara's heart, but in the end, Bakurio started to get fed up with his antics and coldly said, "Get into that body and finish the revival process. Don't waste my time, waste your time." Madara's grin turned cold before he said, "It seems like people have forgotten what fear is. Let me show you." The moment he finished his words, his normal armored Susanoo instantly grew bigger and bigger, gaining a full body and reaching the size of a tall mountain. and with its hands on the handle of the sword, it was clear that he was ready to do some serious damage. Hashirama instantly stood up ready to interfere, but Bakuryo's frown only deepened as he dissolved his Susanoo and simply retrieved his legendary sword before said, "I guess some people only learn the hard way." Then, time seemed to stop as a terrifyingly sharp energy covered Bakuryo's sword. It was his sharp release fueled by his six paths chakra. And what followed next was him disappearing and reappearing right under Madara's Susanoo before using one of the skills of his sword, Doom Slash, and sending it in an upward slash. A huge dark slash left Bakuryo's sword, and to the surprise of the watchers, it cut through Madara's Susanoo like butter all the way to his forehead where his body was, leaving his eyes wide in shock as he was also split in two and his body tried to recover but simply couldn't reattach the two halves as the sharp energy still lingered on them. "Impossible, how could you destroy my Susanoo so easily? Not even Hashirama could do this," muttered Madara with disbelief covering his face, and the same feeling was shared by those watching. Although Bakuryo didn't care at all and simply used his Yomi no Kuni's ability and created a white chain which he then used to capture Madara's soul and shove it inside of his body. "This sword. It's terrifying," muttered Orochimaru, his pale face growing even paler from the demonstration of power. But while he was focusing on the sword, Hashirama was actually focusing on something else. That chakra he just used, it resembled sage chakra, but it was far purer and more complete. "I need to ask him about it later." With this new determination in mind, Hashirama turned his attention to Madara, who just woke up with disbelief still covering his face. For some reason, he was only revived with his Uchiha bloodline. I wonder what kind of modifications Kabuto did in the original timeline for him to revive with the ability to use the Rinnegan. Either way it doesn't matter, thought Bakuryo before he approached the shocked Madara and said, "There's a lot of things I need to show you. Don't resist." Madara regained his calm and narrowed his eyes at this, but he didn't say anything after seeing Bakuryo's strength, as he knew full well that he couldn't take him and Hashirama on his own. Although he wasn't going to cower and simply wanted to know what was going on, so he calmly said, "Show me what's so worth it for you to risk bringing me back to life." Bakuryo nodded at him and simply said, "I will show you all what true terror is," before he used his evolved eye of hypnotism on them to show them a glimpse of the power of those who serve the darkness. After seeing the true terror that the four followers of darkness were capable of, Tobirama and Orochimaru had shocked looks on their faces, while Madara and Hashirama simply remained silent as if they already expected this much. After a while, Madara was the first to open his mouth and say, "There's no hope left for this world. It's best if you follow my initial plan. At least you will spare people from suffering endlessly. What were you planning? Does it have something to do with those eyes?" spoke Hashirama suddenly while pointing at Bakuryo's clone with the Rinnegan, and it truly surprised him how perceptive this first Hokage was despite his laid-back appearance. "I guess that freak Minato will finally find someone to keep him company," he thought as he watched Madara remain silent, so he replied to both of them. Madara indeed had a plan, but it would have failed spectacularly. Madara didn't seem convinced by this, so Bakuryo calmly said, "I can also use Jikaninki, and I know why you wanted to use the infinite Tsukuyomi on the whole world. However, it wouldn't have achieved the effect you are imagining, and why's that?" replied Madara coldly, and Bakuryo simply shrugged and said, "Because the teachings you read on our clan's tablet were changed by Zetsu to manipulate our clan to fall into continuous wars, just for the sake of one of their descendants awakening the Rinnegan and using that ultimate jutsu. However, you never knew the truth of what would have happened to the user. They would have become a vessel for someone else. That bastard." Madara's face was full of rage. He sacrificed a lot only to end up being used as a pawn for someone else's plans. How could he not be furious? However, Bakuryo didn't care about his feelings and started talking to them about the reason for their revival. Meanwhile, in Iwa, the two villages finally reached a consensus and they agreed to establish an alliance. However, Fugaku wasn't going to trust them so easily, so they made a soul contract just in case, which cemented the future cooperation between the two. However, the situation wasn't as optimistic with the Kumo front. In fact, despite Minato's constant pleas with trying to explain to him how serious the situation was, the Fourth Raikage still didn't relent and was confident in their power to fight any force that might try to lay their hands on the Land of Lightning, including Konoha. So, Minato returned empty-handed from this trip. Different from that, the negotiations with Suna that Tsunade led actually went smoothly since the two villages were previously in good relations. As these things were happening, the first signs of chaos started to appear as 5 gates suddenly appeared mysteriously near each one of the strong hidden villages and started greedily absorbing the natural energy in the area. These were the gates of hell. Originally there were 7 of them that appeared randomly from time to time all over the world, luring all kinds of beasts and humans that seek to grow stronger. However, none of them made it back. Including the woman the Hound Sage had been waiting for by dutifully protecting the gate she entered through. But this wasn't all. As news of demons appearing in the land of demons started to spread, they were described as grotesque giant humanoids. However, no one was capable of getting near them and escaping alive, so that's the best description they could get so far. Meanwhile, news had been spreading that recently dead people had suddenly started coming back to life and no one could fathom the reason why. Not to mention, the revived people were acting completely normal. But how can you consider it normal when someone who got his head chopped off was suddenly knocking on your door the next day? Chaos was slowly unfolding, yet nothing beat the terror of the countless giant beasts that started appearing everywhere and attacking anyone that appeared in their path. The strongest of these beasts were trying to establish their territory, making it hell for the merchants as they couldn't leave a hidden village anymore in fear of getting attacked by them and losing their lives, which greatly affected the economy of the world. The hidden villages got news of these changes, and the frequent reports by the various daimyo of their lands worked as a constant reminder of the perilous situation, but at least things weren't completely out of their expectations and they started implementing the plan that Konoha provided. First, block anything that tries to enter or leave the gates of hell. This mission must be managed by a great ninja that wouldn't let his emotions affect him. So, all Jinchuriki were immediately out of the picture since their emotions were their biggest weakness. On the surface, each hidden village put a cage-level ninja in charge. However, in reality, Bakurio planned far more than just this. Hashirama, Madara, Obito, and Tobarama each were guarding the gates in secret in case of any unwanted changes. After all, right now only weaker devils were coming out, but that might not be the case in the future. Of course, not all of them were strong enough to handle this on their own, so Obito had Kisame with him and they all had a clone of Bakurio's with them. Only Kumo's gate was left to them to handle since they weren't part of the alliance, but they didn't seem careless in dealing with it. A few days later, inside a meeting that housed all the important characters of Konoha, Bakurio, "Are you sure they can handle this?" asked Fugaku with a doubtful look on his face. This was a question in regard to a proposal that Bakurio made, which was to let the students of the academy deal with some of the emerging beasts. "I'm sure they can handle this, you know they were trained for this kind of situation, right?" replied Bakurio calmly, to which Fugaku nodded, but some of the other clan heads were still reluctant to agree until he said, "Don't worry, they will go in groups and they will each have supervisors with them. Plus I already hired the Akatsuki to deal with the strongest beasts, and you should know about their strength." The room fell silent after this, and only Shikaku felt his heart shivering as he stared at the cold and calculating eyes of the young man in front of him. "Just how far did you anticipate all of this?" "Fine, but I don't think the other hidden villages are as confident in their students as we are. How do you plan to convince them?" asked Fugaku calmly, and Hiruzen was the one to reply surprisingly, "I guess you plan to spread your education system to them as well after they see how effective it is, right?" It seems like this old man isn't completely brain dead after all, thought Bakurio while staring silently at Hiruzen until he made him feel awkward, especially when it was clear what he was thinking. You are correct, we will need every ounce of strength to deal with this situation, and training capable ninja is a must, replied Bakurio while thinking. This situation will probably last for a while. The dark chakra generated from all of this chaos is what that being is after. So, the longer this lasts, the better it is for him. Okay. We shall do it like that, replied Fugaku, who was worried about Sasuke's well-being, but he knew he couldn't protect him forever. But something else came up to his mind as he suddenly said with a terrifyingly cold look in his eyes, "What should we do about the dead that are resurrecting?" Bakurio smiled eerily at him before he said, "Of course, we send them back the way they came." There was no mercy in his eyes, and it sent chills down the spines of these people that had dead people returning to their clans and did nothing about it. A new group formed in the world of ninjas called the Dead Hunters. And only a few people had an idea about the origins of this group and its purpose. This group with unknown numbers specialized in one thing only, just like their name implied. They hunted the dead. No one knew how they gathered their information or how they appeared, but whenever a dead person came to life, they would immediately be captured and taken to an unknown location never to be seen again. In the Pure Land, Izumo, who was sitting on his throne with a lazy expression on his face, was suddenly visited by one of his underlings. His underling had a hunched back and was wearing a cloak that covered all of his body as if he was afraid of the light touching it, yet this cloak did close to nothing to cover the rotten stench coming from his body, showing just what kind of monstrosity was hiding under that cloak. This was Izumo's right-hand man, and he came to report to him regarding the unwanted development on the surface. So he bowed and said, "Izumo-sama, someone is interfering with our minions. They call themselves the Dead Hunters. How would you like us to deal with them?" There was no worry in the servant's voice, only pure coldness and dullness, so Izumo lazily stared at his underling and replied, "I already sensed someone messing with our plans. And he can control death energy to a certain extent as well and even remove our branding on those bodies." "Mara." Izumo's underling froze slightly before he said, "Would you like me to deal with them personally?" Izumo smiled suddenly and simply leaned back further on his throne and said, "No, things are getting a bit interesting. How can we put an end to them quickly? Plus I already have an idea of who's behind them. Just start with phase 2 of the plan directly and make our cute minions wreak havoc. You can unleash the phantoms to investigate this group, but try to avoid confrontation with them." "Yes, sir," said Mara before he disappeared as eerily as he came, leaving Izumo alone in high throne room to enjoy the wails of terror and despair from the ghosts around him. Someone can use the power of death, huh? I wonder if it's that boy. But a whole group of them appearing. This is quite interesting, muttered Izumo in silence as he felt a bit more excited about the grim future of this world. The capture of Hell, the Pure Land, the Demon Realm, and the Beast World wasn't something done carelessly by the darkness. In fact, other than the Beast World, the others were used as prisons to capture and torment all kinds of helpless souls and turn them into the purest of evil energy for that darkness to devour. As for the main world, it was left as a breeding hub to gather more unfortunate souls to torment. Cruel wasn't enough to describe such a thing, yet this wasn't even the full extent of that darkness. Near Konoha, in a densely forested area, a giant gate suddenly opened and all kinds of devilish beasts started emerging from it. Konoha's ninjas, led by none other than Jiraiya, were prepared for this, so they immediately started a cleaning operation while far in the distance 2 people watched all of this taking place. "Bakurio, are you sure these are the weakest kinds of devils from hell?" asked Hashirama with a concerned look on his face, since as far as he could see, the weakest beast that left the gate so far was at least comparable to an elite chunin. "Unfortunately, yes, and this isn't even the worst of our troubles. I'm sure you already heard of your old friends that started spreading through the land of demons. Soon that land will truly become as its name suggests, and they appear to be no weaker than these devils." Hashirama nodded worriedly before he said, "Thankfully, we evacuated the residents of that land ahead of time thanks to the cooperation of the Land of Earth and the other adjacent lands in the west. Do you have any plans to deal with those demons?" Bakurio nodded at this and said, "Yes, I plan to leave that to the various tailed beasts and their Jinchuriki. Along with Kurama, they should be enough to stabilize that region for a while. Meanwhile, we need to deal with the beasts spreading throughout the world. I have a bad feeling that they are going to be our strongest foes, especially when knowing who's their leader." Hashirama remained silent after remembering the 4 people he saw in Bakurio's genjutsu, and he couldn't help but wonder, "I can't believe all of these things had been hiding in the dark all this time. I guess my current strength isn't enough to do anything about this situation anymore." After a while of silence, Hashirama turned to Bakurio and sincerely bowed before he said, "Please teach me your sage arts. I want to grow stronger." Bakurio remained silent before he said, "To reach my level, you need to master 6 kinds of sage arts. I can help you, but it would still take a while, but I'm sure you can succeed. However, I suggest you follow in Madara's footsteps as well and try improving your bloodline." Hashirama hesitated slightly before he replied confidently, "I saw that Minato already mastered 3 sage arts. I believe I can do the same. As for the matter of bloodlines, I will leave it to when the time is right. As you wish, let's start with the Toad's sage arts." And so, as they protected the gates of hell, Bakuryo's true clone began teaching Hashirama. Ellipsis. Meanwhile, inside Konoha, four people were currently facing each other. They were Kagaya, Hagoromo, Hamura, and Bakuryo's true body. The first to speak was Hagoromo as he asked, Bakuryo-kun, why don't we counterattack instead of fighting passively like this? Didn't you say that this will only create darkness and benefit those people? Hamura and Kagaya seemed to agree with Hagoromo's perspective, but Bakuryo couldn't help but sigh and say, you think I wouldn't have done that if I thought we are strong enough? You and Kagaya are indeed strong since you two retained your powers as the Jinchuriki of the Ten Tails, and even Hamura has gotten stronger after absorbing his old Tenseigin and the power it accumulated during the past 1,000 years. But those four have been around for more than 1,000 years. Not to mention the one behind them. Unless I'm confident in dealing with him, we won't act carelessly, and do you have a plan to deal with this person? Asked Hamura expectantly, causing Bakuryo to remain silent for a while before he smiled coldly and said, yes, I have a plan, but it needs time, and we need to grow as strong as possible. Fine, we shall wait, replied Kagaya calmly. Only she noticed the eerie emptiness that seemed hungry in Bakuryo's eyes, but even she didn't know the meaning behind it. But the chill she felt from it lasted for a long time. Ellipsis. In the Kato village not far from Konoha, a group of 9 teenagers were walking warily while following weird footprints around the village. Teacher, there seem to be many huge beasts nearby, even bigger than the ones we encountered during our Genin exam. The one that said this was none other than Kiba, who had great hunting instincts, and he was saying it to none other than Bakuryo, who had a hunting talent. This village is near Konoha, so the beasts harassing it are considered weak compared to those in the border and empty areas. But you should still act carefully. After all, I'm just here to assist the bunch of you. As he said this, Bakuryo shot a look at the teens behind him. They were Team 7, 8, and 9 respectively. Team 7 was his own and its members were Sasuke, Naruto, and Hinata. Team 8 was made of Kiba, Shino, and Shiki Uchiha, and finally, Team 9 had Sakura, Sogetsu, and Kazuki, the 2 kids that Bakuryo saved and became part of Kakashi's new team. The teens nodded at him and were full of confidence, so Bakuryo simply smiled and said, good then, good luck, before he disappeared from their sights without leaving a trace. However, in reality, he was still standing in front of them and simply turned invisible thanks to his light release and suppressing his scent through wind release. Let's see how the next generation is going to do and if they can help in my future plans, thought Bakuryo as locked into the beasts laying in wait for them not so far away like apex predators. Something doesn't feel right. We've been following the footprints for a while yet we didn't find any beasts, spoke Sasuke with a frown on his face as he kept using his 3-tomo Sharingan to locate the beast yet he didn't find anything. Kazuki, one of the kids that Bakuryo saved, decided to speak. He had fiery red hair and eyes and he turned to Hinata and said with clear bloodthirstiness in his eyes, Oi, Hyuga girl, did you find anything with your Byakugan? Hinata wasn't the timid girl she used to be in the original series, so she wasn't affected by Kazuki's tone, although she still felt uncomfortable by it, so she simply remained silent and shook her head indicating that she couldn't see any beast even after using her Byakugan. However, someone else wasn't going to let this slide by and it was Naruto, who immediately yelled, Oi, Kazuki you bastard, are you asking for a fight? Kazuki's eyes seemed to be ignited in fire as he smirked at Naruto and said, you think I'm scared of you? However, at this moment, 2 people smacked both Naruto's and Kazuki's heads and they were Sakura and Sogetsu respectively, and the latter, unlike his brother, had a calm and aloof personality and an appearance that matched it, with his long blue hair tied in a ponytail with a bang falling down the right side of his face along with cold blue eyes, and he said, I'm sorry for my brother's behavior, Hinata, but now isn't the time for fighting. I have a bad feeling about our current situation. The group nodded at this while Sasuke simply stared silently at Sogetsu. Despite these brothers' disposition, their talent was undeniable as both he and Naruto failed to beat them no matter how much they tried. And as he was sinking into his thoughts, he didn't notice that Sakura shot him a look before she said, Sogetsu is right, we need to calm down and work as a group. I don't want to get punished by teacher again. Shino nodded silently before his expression quickly darkened. Some of his insects which he sent to investigate suddenly disappeared, and he felt a chill by the speed at which that happened, so he quickly yelled, Careful everyone, something's hiding near us. The moment Shino's words echoed, Sasuke and Hinata tried to use their dojutsu once more, yet they still haven't found anything, even despite of Hinata having a 359 degrees vision. However, Kazuki didn't like waiting anymore, so he said coldly, "If they don't come out, I will just force them." Just as Kazuki said this, he jumped into the air and both his hands ignited in fire as he said, "Fire release, fire rain jutsu." Sasuke and Shiki, as members of the Uchiha clan, narrowed their eyes at this, as they knew just how hard it was to use fire release through the tenketsu in the hands, but what was even more surprising is Kazuki's precise control as he created a huge fireball and threw it into the air before he controlled it to explode, creating a literal rain of fire that covered a radius of 30 meters surrounding them in this forest, leaving no place for their enemy to hide. "Amazing," muttered Sakura, who was famous for her chakra control, yet even she knew that it was impossible for her to do such a thing with her current mastery. As everyone marveled at Kazuki's showcase of mastery of fire release, Naruto simply grumbled, but his attention was soon attracted to a patch of land where something started to get into view just a meter away from him. It was a giant transparent head that was almost 2 times bigger than him. "Ah, what the hell is this?" said Naruto as he jumped away, and Kiba's dog started barking in distress as he said, Is this some sort of chameleon?" The eyes of the most perceptive people were attracted to a weird plant growing on the body of this chameleon instead of the beast itself, and it seemed to be releasing some sort of gas that was protecting it from the detection of even the Byakugan and the Sharingan, and enhanced its natural camouflage ability. "Get into formation," said Sogetsu as he observed the fire that was spreading through the forest and glared at his brother before he stepped in front of Naruto and retrieved a sword with a blue handle and directly slashed in front of him. "What are you?" Naruto was about to complain and say he didn't need protection, but blood suddenly spurted from the front of Sogetsu and he was sent flying. "Sogetsu!" yelled Naruto in horror as he saw Sogetsu smash into a few trees before stopping, but the latter calmly said, "I'm okay," without averting his eyes from the still barely visible chameleon. "Careful. His tongue is extremely fast and I could barely react to it even with my Sharingan," said Sasuke immediately, while Shino felt goosebumps all over his body as he thought, "Did it eat my bugs using its tongue as well? What if it aimed it at me instead?" Just the thought of it made him shudder, but he quickly composed himself and got into formation with his teammates. "Shadow Clone Jutsu," said Naruto, creating multiple clones to fight in the front and stall for some time until they made a plan, while Kazuki turned to his brother who was walking back toward them and said, "How was it?" Sogetsu was still calm despite the setback and he didn't even seem injured as he said, "Very strong, at least Jonin level in terms of power. If I didn't use water release to soften the impact, I would have had some broken bones by now. And it's very tough as well. Even a direct slash at its tongue didn't cause it much damage. Shiki, Sasuke, distract it since you two can react to its tongue. Naruto will help out with his shadow clones as well. Sakura and Shino assist from the back lines. Hinata and Kiba, stay aware of the surroundings and help out when needed. Me, Kazuki, and Naruto will try to finish it off." Sogetsu quickly laid out a plan and everyone agreed since they already determined him as the leader in the absence of their teacher, and they immediately set out to act on it. Sasuke had a look of displeasure on his face since he didn't like taking orders from someone else, so he simply smirked and thought, "You can't cut it but I can." By this point, the chameleon had just finished off the last of Naruto's shadow clones and turned its sight to Sasuke, who was nearest to him, but it only found a blinding light gathering at his hand, and Sogetsu couldn't help but yell, "Wait, Sasuke. We don't know the full extent of its abilities yet." However, Sasuke didn't listen to his warning. Maybe it was his hard-headedness or the sound of the Chidori he just created deafening his ears. Either way, he simply charged ahead and focused all of his attention on the tongue of the chameleon, waiting for it to lash at him. "This reckless idiot," thought Sogetsu as he rushed after Sasuke, who realized late enough that the chameleon didn't attack him with its tongue. Instead, it waited until he got close enough before it had a human-like smirk and spewed a giant purple cloud from its mouth point blank at him, and he couldn't stop his charge. At this moment, Sasuke felt time stopping in front of him as his extended hand that was clad in lightning touched the cloud, and he felt his heart sinking as the cloud ignited. No, at this rate this thing will. Before he could even process what was happening, The area in front of him started heating up and he felt out of breath. But right at this instant Sogetsu appeared behind him and said, "Ice release. Ice prison." Boom! Right after, a huge explosion sounded and the shock wave alone sent everyone that was close flying, while the giant chameleon that was now fully exposed actually retreated right after it used its poison cloud so it was unharmed. "Sasuke!" yelled Sakura, who was lucky not to be affected that much by the explosion since she wasn't close, yet no one knew the fate of Sasuke and Sogetsu, who tried to save him as the smoke and dust didn't settle yet, but an angry voice soon sounded in the forest that was set on fire. "Now you really made me angry." It was Kazuki, whose fiery short hair that seemed to defy gravity almost appeared to be on fire as he started approaching the chameleon with pure rage in his eyes. He's gathering the fire generated from the burning forest. Naruto and the other watched in horror as Kazuki muttered, "Fire release, rush of madness." Suddenly, all the fire that was rushing toward Kazuki started to take shape in front of him that was of similar size to him. It was a clone, but it was no normal clone as its whole body was set on fire, highly compressed fire. It had no pupils in its eyes, and the hair was made of literal flickering fire. Its very being yelled destruction, and its next course of action helped to solidify this impression as the clone simply bent down slightly and started rushing at the chameleon like a mad bull. The chameleon didn't have any time to dodge since the attack was too fast, especially since it was in a straight line destroying any obstacles in its way. So, it decided to lash out with its tongue in the hope of at least slowing it down. However, Kazuki, who was behind the clone, simply smirked at this and manipulated it to dodge the tongue. This was out of the expectations of the slightly intelligent chameleon since it believed the clone would keep rushing madly as it had been doing. However, it ended up simply falling to Kazuki's deception, because unlike his hot-headed appearance, when it come to fighting, he was a terrifying being and would do anything to achieve the destruction he wants, and that's just what he did as the clone smashed into the head of the shocked chameleon and exploded, creating a terrifying shockwave while the chameleon couldn't even let out a scream as its head directly disappeared. "TCH, annoying pest," muttered Kazuki while staring at the headless corpse of the chameleon that was still on fire with a weird look in his eyes. Meanwhile, his teammates were simply astonished. "Is this really the power of someone our age?" wondered Kiba, who felt his world was getting flipped upside down, while Sakura, who was Kazuki's teammate, was also in shock as she muttered, "They were considered the strongest in our generation, yet they aren't even showing their full power. Does Teacher Kakashi know about this?" As the 8 of them gathered around Kazuki, the latter simply ignored them and said, "Oi, Sogetsu, for how long are you going to remain hidden?" Hearing this, the group was finally reminded of their possibly dead teammates and they couldn't help but ask Kazuki, "Who are you talking to?" However, just as they did, a pool of water appeared beside Kazuki from which a young man with long blue hair emerged and said calmly, "You idiot, I was hiding in case there were other enemies around." They were shocked by Sogetsu's appearance from the water, but they soon saw Sasuke walking from behind a tree while only having some minor wounds, and they finally heaved a sigh of relief while Sakura directly rushed to Sasuke and inquired with a worried look on her face while tears formed on the sides of her eyes, "Sasuke-kun, are you okay? I thought you were." She couldn't even finish this sentence as the mere thought of it made her heart ache. Meanwhile, Sasuke had an embarrassed look on his face as he said, "Sogetsu saved me, otherwise I would be dead for sure." The reactions of the others were varied, so Naruto curiously asked, "How did you survive that strong explosion? It was almost as strong as Kazuki's attack just now." The others turned to look curiously at Sasuke and Sogetsu, and the latter eventually raised his hand conjuring a spike of ice before he calmly said, "I can use the Kekkei Genkei ice release." "Oh. Sogetsu-kun, you are amazing. I only thought you were skillful with water release," said Hinata in admiration, which brought a look of annoyance to Naruto's face as he said, "Oh, I can do it too, look," before he raised his hand into the air, but nothing happened even after he kept screaming. However, this at least lightened the mood, but the cold look on Sogetsu's face didn't change as he stared at his brother and said, "You should have known why I was hiding. Why did you expose my position?" These two brothers from a young age had to become hunters to survive in their clan, so they knew each other's habits very well. Kazuki simply put his hands behind his back and said nonchalantly, "What? We dealt with the enemy, so there was no need to keep the others worried about you and Sasuke, that's all." Sogetsu narrowed his eyes at this and he was about to say something, but someone suddenly fell from the sky at a surprising speed and landed right on top of Kazuki, causing him to plunge into the earth while stars started to revolve around his head from the dizziness he was feeling. This was of course Bakurio, and he was staring at Kazuki with a colder look than Sogetsu's as he held him by the neck and took him out of the ground before he said, "Do you want to die?" "Teacher, what are you doing?" yelled Sakura, feeling the worst for her teammate, but Bakurio ignored her and simply glared at Kazuki. Surprisingly, Sogetsu stopped everyone from coming closer and they couldn't understand what was happening. All they knew was that Bakurio was truly angry for some reason. "Let go of me," said Kazuki through his gritted teeth, and Bakurio, seeing that he was still acting hard-headed, frowned even deeper and said, "You planned to use everyone here as bait to drag other beasts out, didn't you? Including using the smell from the still-burning chameleon." The other 9 teammates froze slightly in shock before it turned to anger, especially Naruto, who didn't like to cause harm to his friends. Meanwhile, Sogetsu, who realized this from the start, simply remained silent and thought, "Is teacher doing this for me? He doesn't want me to fight with Kazuki." Sogetsu's eyes flickered slightly as he stared at the only man he looked up to. "You. How could you?" Naruto was about to rush to Kazuki and scold him, but Bakurio glared at him, sending chills down his spine that caused him to stop in his tracks. "I don't know what you are talking about," said Kazuki while trying to not stare Bakurio in the eyes. "Well, your plan worked splendidly. You've drawn one of the most annoying things to deal with," said Bakurio coldly, surprising the team of 10. Including Sogetsu, who didn't feel the presence of any threat, but Hinata immediately used her Byakugan after hearing this and was shocked by what she saw. "Teacher. Under us." She didn't understand what she saw, but she was sure that it was right under them and moving rapidly at them despite it not disturbing the ground at all. Not far behind them, where the giant body of the chameleon was, the earth under it suddenly cracked, and from it emerged a giant snake-looking being. It had countless sharp teeth in its open round mouth, and once the body of the chameleon got in it, it was instantly chopped up and devoured. Kazuki watched all of this with wide eyes, and before long, he realized, no, this isn't what the Hyuga girl warned about, and he was right as the earth below them opened up and he watched as a terrifying black hole filled with sharp teeth appeared under them. No, this isn't how it was supposed to go, he thought. Yet the approaching mouth and yells of his teammates showed him just how cruel reality was, as everyone was torn into pieces, including his teacher, whose severed hand was still holding his neck as he fell into the abyss of the giant worm's stomach. "No, teacher, brother, no," he yelled as tears started forming at the sides of his eyes and his whole body exploded with a terrifying wave of flame, creating a giant pillar of fire that illuminated the darkness around him and showed him the lifeless body parts of his teammates, which he could clearly recognize and were slowly dissolving from the acids of the worm's stomach. And just as he was about to fall into absolute despair, the scene around him started to break apart as a pair of 2 blood-red eyes stood not too far away from his face, and Bakurio's voice echoed in his ears. "I hope you learned your lesson, and remember, even a worm can take your life if you are not careful in the current world we live in. After all, you never know when your own food starts hunting you, just like this chameleon," before he disappeared once more. "Was all of that a genjutsu? That bastard tricked me," muttered Kazuki with anger on his face, but his brother simply stared at him coldly and pointed behind him. Kazuki turned his head while saying, "What?" But he suddenly froze as a terrible sense of fear rose from the bottom of his heart. Because right behind him were the severed bodies of many giant worms, and he could easily see the countless teeth they had in their mouths, especially from the one that was only a hand's reach away from him. Kazuki and Sogetsu are 2 brothers of unknown origin. They were discovered by a small ninja clan in the land of forests that weren't part of any hidden village. When they reached the age of 5, they both started showing a terrifying level of talent and intellect despite being completely different in the way they approached things, with Sogetsu being calm and likes to avoid taking unnecessary risks while Kazuki was slightly more reckless. However, rumors of their terrifying talents soon started spreading, and their clan ended up being surrounded by their enemies who feared the growth of such strong enemies, so they tried to kill them multiple times for years, but they survived under the protection of their clan that ended up losing many of their people to preserve their lives despite the world calling them monsters. Then, after years of this going on, one of Bakurio's clones was passing by that area after having gone to investigate the land of demons, but he ended up getting attacked by the 2 boys who decided to leave their clan so as to not burden it anymore. thinking that he was after their heads as well. Seeing how strong they were, he decided to take them in and used his reputation and the reputation of Konoha to put that clan under their protection before he took them away with him. One day I will get revenge on that bastard, said Kazuki hatefully, to which Sogetsu smacked him on the head and said, have some respect, he's our teacher, you want to fight? Sogetsu, yelled Kazuki with flames bursting around him, but Sogetsu simply shrugged at him and with an unfazed look said, teacher said that one day, the worms you look down on will take a good bite of you, and if it's good enough, you won't even have the time to regret it. TCH, that day will never come, said Kazuki with scorn, but he suddenly felt a chill building behind him and his sharp instincts warned him of something terrifying, yet when he turned around, he simply saw Naruto and Sasuke staring at him silently with the latter having his Sharingan activated instinctively. Was it these two that made me feel that way? No, I can easily beat them. What's going on? Wondered Kazuki while Sogetsu simply narrowed his eyes and thought. It seems like even I can't slack, otherwise these two will surpass me one day. After this incident, the hunting trip became smoother since not all beasts had unique capabilities to hide from the detection of the Sharingan and the Byakugan. However, it was still not easy since they had to go all out multiple times and risk their lives just to survive. At one point, both Sogetsu and Kazuki had to show more of their true power as the former used his strong ice release in combination with Kazuki's scorch release to defeat many strong beasts. Meanwhile, Bakurio, who was watching all of this, narrowed his eyes. Leaving the kids to hunt the beasts seems to be quite difficult. Considering that this team is probably the strongest out there, it might prove to be impossible for the others. However, these two are truly proving to be more and more monstrous. Just where will their potential end, I wonder? The potential that Kazuki and Sogetsu were showing was that of the best geniuses like Minato and Itachi and maybe even more, but he always felt that there was something unnatural about it, and it unnerved him to know that their origin was unknown. Everything will become clear in due time. For now, I need to reconsider my plan to involve the kids in these missions. But first, a map of the population of the beasts needs to be completed and thankfully, Hamura will soon finish recording everything with his Tenseigin, thought Bakurio, and after seeing that the kids had no strength left to fight, he summoned a giant snake and gave them a ride back to Konoha. That day, Hamura finished with his mapping and Bakurio went to meet with Fugaku and Shikaku to make a proper plan for their next course of action. Oh, Bakurio. How did the test go? Did the kids do well enough and is everyone okay? Asked Shikaku since they already knew that this was an important experiment for their future plans. I collected the most perfect team I could think of in terms of utility and hunting prowess, and all I can say is that they didn't do too bad. But they are all fine with only some minor injuries here and there, replied Bakurio, and he noticed from the corner of his eyes the stoic Fugaku letting out a sigh of relief. Here's a detailed report of what happened and what we encountered. However, I suggest you leave it for later and take a look at this first. Bakurio threw a stack of paper on the desk that contained the report of the mission, causing Fugaku to frown, but his eyes soon widened as he saw Bakurio take out a huge scroll that was even taller than him, and he used the shadow clone jutsu to create two clones to hold it and open it. What this? Asked Fugaku in surprise, and Bakurio calmly replied, this is a map of our world, and I asked for a friend's help in mapping the territories of the beasts in terms of their numbers and strength level. What? How reliable is this map? Yelled Shikaku in shock, realizing just how difficult it is to complete such a task in such a short time, and even Fugaku couldn't help but stand up since he knew that many beasts were cage level in terms of strength, so they weren't able to gather information properly despite them sending many strong ninjas. This map is 100% accurate, but only for now since these beasts are ever moving, but I can provide an update every now and then. This is great. With this, we can avoid many casualties and assign missions to the correct people. This is truly a huge contribution to the village. I can't thank you and your friend enough, spoke Fugaku with pure gratitude before he bowed slightly, and Shikaku followed suit since as a strategist, he understood more than anyone the importance of information. Don't worry about it, although I must say, even I was surprised by the number of high-level beasts, spoke Bakurio while letting out a sigh, and Shikaku couldn't help but ask, how do we read this map? Since there were many symbols. This map has two types of information. First, the danger level, meaning the minimum rank of a ninja required to enter that area and its equivalent to the power level of the strongest beast there. It ranges from SS to D, with D being Genin and SS being Super Cage, and each one of these ranks has 3 ranks in them, for example D, D, D+. Bakurio paused here to allow them to absorb this information, and he could see the two of them gulping down in fear as they took a closer look at the map and noticed the massive number of S in it and countless A and even some SS here and there. "This is crazy," spoke Fugaku with a dark look on his face, but he quickly hid it and asked calmly, "What's the second type of information?" Bakurio nodded in approval inside his head. "That's right. You are the Hokage. You can't appear hopeless in this situation no matter what," he thought before he said. "The second kind of information is how infested the area is in beasts. That is indicated by color ranging from blue for a minuscule amount of beast to red for a highly infested area." "I see," spoke Fugaku before he remained silent as Shikaku sent him a worried look, and Bakurio simply remained silent and waited for him to speak. "Your plan. I will fully agree to it. I finally understand you. We really need every ounce of power we could muster," spoke Fugaku with a worried look on his face as he thought. "Sorry Sasuke. I can't protect you or the other kids anymore. You will have to face the cruelty of this world at a young age as well." Meanwhile, Bakurio calmly nodded before he took out another huge map and said, "This map has the types of beasts in each area and the names of the strongest beast there. Make plans for the hunting to start." Shikaku nodded and said, "Leave it to me." Bakurio nodded in appreciation before he said, "By the way, how is the building of the academy going?" In the Fourth Ninja World War that was supposed to happen a few years from now, the army of the alliance made by the various hidden villages as well as the samurai from the Land of Iron only consisted of 80,000 members, and they lost half of them on the first day. Now however, the number of beasts of A rank alone surpasses 100,000, not to mention the hundreds of S rank. This force wasn't something that could be faced by normal means, so Bakurio planned to build academies in each land that work as both a way to gather talents to groom into strong ninjas or samurais depending on their potential as well as bases of command. Thankfully, humans will always remain smarter than beasts, so they can find a way to overcome the difference in strength. Ellipsis. Hearing Bakurio's question, Fugaku responded with his face still stern from the earlier shocking information. "Yes, we already got the approval of the other major lands with the exception of the Land of Lighting." So the Land of Iron joined our alliance as well?" asked Bakurio with intrigue, and Fugaku nodded in response before he said, "Yes, they decided to join our alliance under the leadership of their General Mifune." "I see, that's good to hear. Make sure to finish building those academies as soon as possible. As you can see, just dealing with those devil gates will be a problem in the near future if far more stronger devils keep leaving them. We will need to produce more manpower as soon as possible." Fugaku remained silent before he nodded and said, "I understand." Understanding how hopeless he was feeling at the grim future they were facing through his Jikaninki, Bakurio smiled slightly at Fugaku before he said, "Don't worry. I'm preparing many things to face this disaster. Trust me." Seeing the confident look on Bakurio's face, Fugaku felt a rush of adrenaline emerging from the deepest part of his soul, and even Shikaku felt the same as he clenched his hands and said, "Let's do this." Bakurio nodded at them before he disappeared, with the confident smile having been completely wiped out of his face and was replaced with pure coldness. "We've allied with the Land of Iron, huh? I guess it's time I go find that man. It's time to evolve my swordsmanship mastery and grow stronger." As Bakurio was trying to react to the ever-changing situation all around the globe, a huge rush of dark energy was rising to an unknown location. It was generated from all the chaos that was happening. And in that location, covered in absolute darkness, 4 people were currently kneeling in front of a throne in a dimly lit room. "How's the situation?" spoke the hidden shadow on the throne with an eerie tone as the sound of chains rustling echoed in the background. "Everything is going as intended with the gates of hell. We didn't initiate an all-out attack, and we plan to slowly increase the level of devils emerging from the gates. In fact, this is a good way to train my underlings as well." The first one to speak was Amatsu, whose forces were currently putting the biggest pressure on the hidden villages. "My demons are slowly conquering the land of demons and will soon try to spread to the rest of the world," replied Doji with as few words as possible as his dark abyssal eyes threatened to swallow the few traces of light left in the room. My ghosts are being hunted down by an unknown force that can control the power of death. We weren't able to deal as big of an impact as the others, spoke Izumo hesitantly, which made him receive looks of scorn from his peers, yet the shadow on the throne didn't say anything. Yet. My forces haven't made a move yet. I'm waiting to see what kind of preparation the humans will make to face us before I decide on the amount of power necessary to deal with them. After all, our mission isn't to eradicate them, that would be too easy. Seryu spoke calmly, with the wild aura usually seen surrounding his body now appearing to be restrained. After each one of them gave his report, the rustling sounded once more before the eerie voice said, "Izumo, I'm disappointed." Izumo instantly knelt even lower and said, "I'm sorry, my lord, I'm going to rectify the situation as soon as possible." An eerie silence covered the room as Izumo and the other three were covered by a terrible aura that sent chills down their spines as a devilish voice, seemingly coming from their very hearts, echoed throughout their bodies. "My darkness, it was forged by my prison for countless years, and I vowed that I will make my suffering bloom until I'm free again." After some silence, the eerie voice echoed in their hearts again, "I have no goodness left, it was taken from me, stolen. So, all I want you for to do is spread my terror, tear from the consciousness of these people the will to live, leave no traces of hope, force them to embrace despair. Until the time comes, for me to reap their souls." After this voice echoed in their hearts, the four of them found themselves back in their domains, and they all had cold sweat covering their bodies as the curse that was controlling them triggered one last time as the eerie voice said, "I won't accept failure. That idiot Izumo really screwed us up along with him," thought Seryu with an awkward smile after regaining his bearing, and he could only wish that this kind of mistake doesn't occur again. Just who in the hell could seal such a monster? Muttered Amatsu before she shook her head and continued to order her followers. Meanwhile, in the Pure Lands, Izumo's face was twisted like that of a ghost as he called for his right-hand man Mara and yelled, "How come our ghosts got captured the moment they left the Pure Land?" Mara froze slightly before he bowed slightly, although it was hard to notice with his already hunched back, before he said, "Izumo-sama, I detected someone using the impure land summoning jutsu to capture our ghosts and trap them into weird seals. This is clearly a carefully laid out plan targeted against us." Izumo frowned slightly since he didn't expect such a thing would happen. The ghosts are quite strong if someone doesn't know how to deal with them in their spiritual form, but if the person dealing with them is experienced with souls, it would be a piece of cake to deal with them before they possess a body. This is quite troublesome, thought Izumo before he ordered, "Have you found the identity of the person using Edo Tensai?" Asked Izumo calmly, and Mara instantly replied, "I'm sure he's working with the dead hunters. As for his identity, the most likely suspect is Orochimaru." Izumo went silent for a while before he ordered, "Send the Soul Reapers to claim his head for me." Mara calmly bowed again before he said, "As you wish, Izumo-sama." Before he took his leave while thinking, it seems like Izumo-sama is truly angry, for him to actually mobilize the Soul Reapers this early. Meanwhile, Orochimaru suddenly felt an itch in his nose until he sneezed, and he couldn't help but wonder, "Is someone talking about me?" before he shook his head and continued his research. Meanwhile, Kabuto was working on improving Edo Tensai, and he was the one behind the capture of the ghosts, yet Orochimaru was soon going to face the wrath of a terrifying being for something he didn't even do, and that being was the living representation of the thing he wished to avoid the most: death. In the Land of Sound, a new hidden village was born under the leadership of its Kage, a young man called Kimimaro. Despite his young age, this young man had terrifying capabilities that made his reputation quickly spread as he dealt with any threat the village faced and earned him the recognition of the other hidden villages. In this timeline, Kimimaro has cured thanks to Bakurio's efforts, and he made sure to remove any ideas of Orochimaru trying to turn him into his new vessel. Although it was unfortunate that he couldn't change his loyalty no matter how much he tried, as the latter seemed fixated to repay his debt to Orochimaru. "How's the situation?" asked Kimimaro calmly while reading a few reports he received. His secretary stared bashfully at his well-developed body before she spoke shyly. "There's an increase in ghosts in our surroundings. Would you like us to contact the dead hunters?" "It appears like I might need to change my secretary," Agon thought Kimimaro with a sigh before he spoke. "I will handle that. As you wish, Otokage-sama." "Do you need anything else?" asked the secretary, but Kimimaro calmly dismissed her offer and retrieved a special communication device that Bakurio left him. After injecting his chakra into it, a voice soon responded to him from the other end. What's wrong, Kimimaro? I need some assistance. The number of ghosts and dead is abnormally high in the land of the sound. Do you have any idea about why this is happening? Bakurio remained silent for a second before he replied. I think they are trying to retaliate against us for the way we stole those ghosts, although it seems like they took precautions and the Edo Tensei isn't as effective anymore. Keep an eye out. I will send someone to help you out, okay? Just make sure that Orochimaru-sama is safe. Kimimaro suddenly interrupted his words as he heard the sound of screaming coming from outside his office, and it instantly made his eyes turn ice cold as he recognized that sound as the sound of his beautiful secretary. What's going on? Asked Bakurio hurriedly, since he could hear the terror contained in that scream, but Kimimaro didn't respond to him and the call was soon cut as the last thing he could hear was the sound of someone rushing at a fast speed. This reckless brat, muttered one of Bakurio's true clones that was communicating with Kimimaro from the base of the Dead Hunters that was built underground somewhere in the Land of Fire. Is that bastard Izumo using his high-level forces? I need to assist Kimimaro as soon as possible. As Bakurio reached this conclusion, his true body instantly activated his Tenseigen, which allowed him to cross a huge distance until his vision reached the Land of Sound. There, he saw some eerie-looking giants that were at least 300 meters tall and were covered in some sort of fog, and that fog they secreted covered all of the village hidden in the sound and made it hard for people to see what was going on even with special dojutsu. What are these things? How did I appear like this unnoticed? Wondered Bakurio as he counted that there were 7 such giants and they were surrounding the village from all directions. Then he noticed their red eyes shining eerily, and for some reason, the people in the hidden village became aggressive and started to attack each other, and whenever someone died, their souls would be absorbed by those giants. These were the Soul Reapers deployed by Izumo, terrifying beings born from the death energy of the Pure Lands. They had the power to use very strong genjutsu that affect the mental state of the target as well as the ability to absorb souls to grow even stronger. They can also use death energy to attack, making them very fearsome opponents of at least mid-cage level. Seeing his subordinates killing each other, Kimimaro's eyes narrowed and he instantly used his Kekkei Genkei, Shikatsumyaku. Countless bones started spurting from the ground, sealing the movement of anyone that couldn't resist the effect of the genjutsu of those 7 monsters and stopping them from harming their allies. Meanwhile, Orochimaru came out of his base and stood beside Kimimaro before he opened his mouth and summoned a sea of small snakes that bit those fallen under the genjutsu and helped them regain their consciousness by injecting them with his chakra, although he retrieved it with some bonus when those snakes returned to him. These beings are bad trouble. We might need to evacuate the village, spoke Orochimaru with a stern look on his face as he observed the 7 giants that didn't make a direct move yet, but Orochimaru was sure that their huge size wasn't just for show. I will buy us time, Orochimaru-sama. Please gather all you need and leave the village through the hidden passage. Orochimaru stared at Kimimaro silently and was about to say something, but one of the giants didn't give them too much time to contemplate as it opened its mouth that almost appeared like a black hole. Then, a huge dark ball gathered in front of it. Is this a tailed beast bomb? No, this feeling, it reminds me of Bakurio. This is bad. Orochimaru had a serious look on his face as he bit his thumb and used a huge amount of his chakra to summon 5 Rashomon gates. Kimimaro too had a serious look on his face as he recognized this energy that stank with the aura of death and immediately used one of his strongest defensive jutsu as he said, Bone Release. Gate of the Lost Garden. As he finished his words, countless bones started to emerge from the ground and interweave together to form a giant gate as big as the Rashomon gates, although its design was different as it was intricate and had a more elegant feel. After charging its ball of death, the giant directly launched it at the strong defenses. Kimimaro's garden's gate resisted for some time, yet it wasn't enough to fully nullify the attack, which eventually landed on the 5 Rashomon gates and appeared to be going through them like a hot knife through butter, and it was only until it landed on the last gate which it successfully broke as well that it eventually exhausted its power and disappeared. What kind of ridiculous power is this? Asked Orochimaru with his pale face becoming a tad bit paler, and Kimimaro didn't have a good look on his face as well. As they were marveling in shock, 4 ninjas appeared near them and said, Lord Orochimaru, please leave and let us deal with those monsters. These were the Sound 4, Orochimaru's most talented subordinates. However, Orochimaru didn't have the time to appreciate their loyalty as one mouth after the other started opening from the rest to the 6 Soul Reapers, and 6 more balls of death started to gather in their mouths. "We need to stop them before they completely charge their attack," yelled one of the Sans 4, but Kimimaro and Orochimaru were already acting as they attacked the giant bodies of those monsters with all of their power. Yet, their attacks seemed to do nothing to those beings as they didn't even leave a scratch, which left them perplexed. "Something isn't right. How come our attacks seem to disappear into thin air?" wondered Orochimaru, but his face started to grow hopeless as he knew that he didn't have any chance to escape anymore, causing him to start to grow desperate. "What should I do? Will Bakurio really allow his precious research to get destroyed? No, I need to buy as much time as possible." As Orochimaru's thoughts reached this point, his body suddenly began to swell up to the shock of his subordinates who started yelling his name in worry, but he didn't pay them any heed, and not long after, a giant white hydra with 8 heads and tails stood in front of them. This was Orochimaru's 8 branches jutsu and his ultimate snake-related jutsu. Then he without hesitation used 6 of his heads and swallowed the 6 death balls and sent them to collide with the giant monsters in the hope they die from their own attack. And soon after, a giant explosion echoed that rocked the area and caused everything in its range to wither and die. As the dust and chaos from the explosion settled down, Kimimaro and the Sounds 4 could finally see the result of the confrontation between Orochimaru's giant snake form and the 7 unknown monsters, and it wasn't to their liking as they could see that 6 of the giant heads of Orochimaru's snake form had completely disappeared. As for the remaining 2 heads and the body, they were completely withered and rotten like a body that had been retrieved from its grave, which made the already dangerous situation turn much eerier. "Lord Orochimaru!" yelled Kimimaro and was prepared to attack the 7 giants recklessly, but a girl that was a member of the Sounds 4 suddenly held him back and pointed at the giant snake's body. "This is..." Kimimaro's eyes lit up as he noticed that one of the remaining withered snake heads was twitching, and not long after, Orochimaru's slimy body came out of it, although he appeared older and completely drained of all of his power. In fact, he seemed to be barely standing, so Kimimaro quickly rushed to his side and lent him his shoulder to hold on to. "Lord Orochimaru, what should we do?" Kimimaro didn't ask if he was alright since he could already tell that Orochimaru was on the verge of death, so he instead wanted to see if there was a way for them to deal with this situation, and Orochimaru eventually turned to stare at the 7 giants with his snake-like slitted eyes that were full of an eerie coldness as he said, "These giant forms aren't their real bodies, they are merely an illusion created by that fog they are secreting. Their true form is that of small pale beings with lamb-like horns, and they seem to be completely immune to that death energy since they didn't receive any damage from the explosion earlier." Kimimaro frowned when he heard this. "It seems like our only chance is to attack them from close range." With this thought in mind, he was prepared to rush at them, but Orochimaru used the remainder of his strength to hold him back. "Don't get close to them. That fog is a strong genjutsu that can even rival the Sharingan of the Uchiha." "What should we do then?" asked one of the Sounds 4, a 2-headed person, but before Orochimaru and Kimimaro could come up with a plan, the first giant that attacked them with the ball of death started charging another ball aimed at them, which made them feel helpless. "You guys should run. I can revive myself, but you guys have no chance to live if you stay here," spoke Orochimaru while trying to stand on his own without Kimimaro's help. "But Lord Orochimaru," yelled the Sound 4, and Orochimaru couldn't help but wonder, "When did I get so soft?" Before he turned to the 7 giants and eyed them coldly like a venomous snake, and he was ready to take at least one of them down with him. But his subordinates didn't obey him, and they remained with him, which shocked him, prompting him to say, "How foolish," although the smile on his face told another story. "Fine then, let's show them the strength of the village hidden in the sound." Yes. By 5 inches, the giant didn't care much about them as it sent the terrifying ball of death it was charging, planning to wipe them out with it. "It seems like they realized that I wouldn't be able to survive because of this death energy even through the use of my curse marks. What foolish subordinates, but I guess it's fine to die with these people." For the first time in a long time, Orochimaru accepted death, his greatest fear. But then another feeling started burning from the bottom of his soul as a certain regret was building in his heart. What if I pursued strength rather than eternal life? Would I be able to beat these monsters? What if? A question many don't get a second chance in life to answer, But today you will be granted that chance. A voice suddenly sounded in the ears of the sound ninjas as a lone figure stood in front of them. They instantly recognized who that wide back clothed in black clothing belonged to. It was the young man that was working their master like a slave for his own research, but now, he was also the person preparing to save them. Orochimaru opened his eyes and shot Bakurio a weak smile. You are finally here. Bakurio didn't respond as he analyzed the approaching attack. After Bakurio learned everything Orochimaru could teach, he removed his clones from his labs and created one of his own that only he knew the location of. However, he didn't trust what Orochimaru could do with the research they accumulated, so he planted a spy among his researchers who was in reality one of his true clones. This same true clone was the one taking action right now, and he calmly stared at the rushing attack before he activated the six-path Sage mode and used the gentle fist to create a terrifying shock wave that destroyed the ball of death from the inside out. Then, with the white mist of the Sage release revolving around his body, the true clone calmly approached the giants. Careful, their genjutsu can't be underestimated, yelled one of the Sounds 4, a guy with multiple hands, but Kimimaro simply shook his head and said, those monsters are doomed. Why do you say this, Kimimaro? Asked the spider guy, and Kimimaro simply said, because they are facing a much more terrifying monster. Meanwhile, Bakurio was calmly thinking, their main attack power is their genjutsu and death release, but they are both useless against me. However, I can't keep this sage state for long. I need to finish this fight fast. The true clone noticed that he couldn't see through the illusion of the 7 monsters with his normal Sharingan, so he relied on his shared vision with the main body to locate the 7 bodies of the Soul Reapers. Thankfully, I awakened the Tensagen, otherwise, this fight would have been more difficult than it needed to be. With this thought in mind, the true clone retrieved a sword and started attacking the Soul Reapers with his Void Sword, which took them by surprise, and he instantly followed up with terrifying storm release that cut any escape paths they had and left them with multiple holes. I wonder what kind of thing will come of these bodies. The true clone had a wicked smile on his face as he eyed the bodies of the horned gargoyle-looking monsters in front of him. What kind of monster is this? Wondered the Sound 4, while Orochimaru's eyes shined with unprecedented light as he thought, there's no meaning in having a long life if you can't protect it. Oi Orochimaru, there are quite a few ghosts and dead surrounding your village and attacking your ninjas. Is this really the time to start acting creepy? Asked Bakurio with a smile, reminding the 6 ninjas about the current situation in their village. They finally realized why no other ninja tried to assist them. Can you help us? As you can see, I can't do much in my current state. Plus, it's a bit your fault for not acting fast enough. Asked Orochimaru with a shameless smile which made Bakurio frown slightly. Yes, it's not easy to trick a snake. He knew about the existence of this clone somehow and decided to pretend not to know just in case such a situation happens and I end up saving his ass. Fine, since I'm here anyway, replied Bakurio with a shrug which brought a smile to Kimimaro's face as he felt this scene was too familiar. These two will never stop trying to trick each other, he thought before he nodded at Orochimaru and disappeared back to the village and started a terrifying killing spree that garnered him the nickname, White Demon. In the Hokage's office in Konoha, the atmosphere was heavy to the point that some people were feeling out of breath, all because of the recent news of the attack on the village hidden in the Sound. Bakurio recounted to them what happened, and Hiashi was the first to speak. Beings with strong genjutsu making it hard to locate them and caused chaos among the ranks of weak-minded ninjas, yet they can also use devastating attacks despite them being a bit slow and need time to recharge. Just what kind of other monsters are we not aware of and will have to face in the future? Fugaku frowned when he heard this, but he eventually shook his head and said, the problem is their ability to avoid detection. You all know who's the true leader of the village hidden in the Sound. That snake isn't someone careless in terms of security. In fact, he might even be better than us in that regard, so it's safe to assume that those monsters are masters of infiltration. The heavy mood grew much more heavier, and eventually, Shikaku turned to Bakurio and asked, how do you suggest we deal with them? All the attention in the room instantly focused on Bakurio and he couldn't help but frown as he stared at their hopeful eyes and thought, this is bad, they are becoming too reliant on me. Bakurio's blood-red eyes shined with a devilish light as he said, they are beings that can even face the strongest of cages. One way to deal with them is to have a lot more strong ninjas at our disposal, or you can think of a better solution on your own. I won't be able to help you every time such a thing happens. Choza, The clan head of the Akamichi slammed his giant hand on the table and said, "Are you saying you won't help the village if we get attacked?" Choza, stop. This isn't what Bakurio's saying, spoke Inoichi, the clan head of the Yamanaka clan and a close friend of Choza. Yet Bakurio eerily stared at them and said, "No, that's exactly what I meant. I don't have the time to waste on wiping your asses every time a problem arises. You will have to learn how to deal with these kinds of problems on your own, starting from now, and continuing ahead in the unknown future." After Bakurio said this, he disappeared like an illusion, leaving Choza and many who shared his opinion fuming in anger as someone yelled, "How can he act so irresponsible? Indeed, we should punish him. His power got to his head." As the voices started to accumulate, Fugaku suddenly opened his eyes, which already transformed into his Mangekyo Sharingans, and shot every single person that opened his mouth a heartless glare before he yelled, "Silence!" The room grew silent as no one wanted to offend the strong Hokage, and they were shocked when they heard him say, "Bakurio's contribution to the village and the whole world is far more than any of you can achieve in 10 lifetimes. I better not hear any of you complaining about his decisions in the future, or they will instantly be expelled from the village." Choza wasn't convinced, and considering his status as a member of the Ino Shika Cho alliance, he tried to complain, saying, "But 5th Hokage, he's clearly avoiding responsibility." However, someone suddenly cut Choza off, and it was none other than Shikaku, who had a similar look to Fugaku as he said, "I agree with the Hokage, plus all of you seem to be misunderstanding something." Choza had a doubtful look on his face as he saw his old friend opposing him, so held back his anger and asked, "What did we misunderstand?" Shikaku let out a long sigh as his lazy but sharp eyes scanned the crowd before he said, "These monsters you are fearing, they are merely pawns the enemy sent out, and we don't even know how many they can send in the future. The people Bakurio have been worried about and dealing with this whole time are the masters behind these disasters we are facing. You should be grateful that he doesn't simply abandon this world and leave it to face its demise." Choza froze slightly as he and many others simply couldn't fathom what kind of being Shikaku was talking about, but one thing was for sure, many of these clans that complained lost a lot of their standing in the village after this incident. Meanwhile, in front of Konoha's Hell Gate, Hashirama was sitting silently on top of a rock with his eyes closed as Bakurio approached him and asked, "How's your training going?" Bakurio noticed that Hashirama's eyelids were orange with black contours surrounding the eyes, and when he opened them, Bakurio was surprised to see that he had toad pupils. Clearly he already learned the toad sage arts. "I'm doing fine. My real body is guarding the gate here while my clones are training in Mount Myoboku. What a terrifying talent. This guy truly deserves his reputation as a monster among monsters," thought Bakurio while staring at Hashirama's innocent smile, although he could see the true beast it was hiding. "That's great. For the snake sage art, you will have to visit Raichi Cave personally and meet the white snake sage. I will be here guarding the gate in your stead while you do so." "Oh, that will be much appreciated," spoke Hashirama enthusiastically, and how can he not be? He was growing stronger, but he suddenly paused and asked Bakurio curiously, "How's Madara doing?" Bakurio had a strange look on his face when he heard this question, and he couldn't help but mutter, "Madara, huh? Well, he." Flashback. "Give me back my Rinnegan," spoke Madara coldly after he got to a secluded location alone with Bakurio, but Bakurio simply shrugged and replied, "Nope. I won't give you anything, plus you can't use them anyway since you don't have Hashirama's bloodline anymore, at least not to their full extent. Is this your final answer?" spoke Madara again with his eyes slowly transforming into his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, but Bakurio was unfazed as his eyes also transformed and he remained silent. "Fine then, let's see what kind of power you have, you who also possess Jikaninki." A terrifying clash started between the old Uchiha legend and the young Uchiha legend, and the final victor was without a doubt Bakurio, whose Susanoo was stronger than Madara, not to mention that he also has 6-path Sage Chakra. "Impossible. How can you be this strong when my chakra reserves are clearly far stronger than yours?" "Ah," spoke Madara in astonishment as he coughed some blood, yet he didn't seem bothered as his eyes remained fixed on Bakurio, waiting for an answer to his question. Bakurio remained silent for a bit before he said, "Indeed, you by far surpass me in the quantity of chakra, but in terms of quality, mine is far higher than you can begin to imagine." "Quality?" muttered Madara, and Bakurio calmly approached him and said, Haven't you learned your lesson after having faced Hashirama all this time? I will give you a bit of advice. You better start putting your ego in check, otherwise he's going to leave you in the dust, and not only him but many others. Madara felt helplessness covering his body. When he recognized his weakness against Hashirama, he decided to follow the quick path to success and captured Kurama to assist him in his fight, but even that wasn't enough to surpass his rival and he was forced to go the other path of stealing his bloodline. Yet now, he encountered someone who could defeat him despite having his same bloodline, so how can he not be moved? He could grow stronger without external help. Yet, despite all of his emotions, his ego still didn't allow him to ask for help, and Bakurio realized this, so he let out a sigh and lent him his hand and said, "Do you want to grow stronger?" Madara stared for a long time at Bakurio's outstretched hand and his eyes that returned to normal. He even used Jikaninki as his right eye started bleeding, yet he couldn't feel any ulterior motives in Bakurio's heart, so he eventually took Bakurio's hand and said, "I accept your offer. You should start calling me teacher then," spoke Bakurio with a wide grin, but Madara simply turned his head away and said, "In your dreams, tch what a tsunere," thought Bakurio. End of flashback. "Oh, I can't believe he accepted to be trained by you. I can't wait to see his progress," spoke Hashirama, and Bakurio could see the clear happiness on his face for his friend, which brought a smile to his face. What a guy. Thank you for listening guys, see you in the next part.